The world's most dangerous military conflict just paused, not because of a peace treaty, but because the global economy simply ran out of breath.
Yeah, I mean, it is a profound shift in how we understand modern warfare, really. And we're seeing the mechanics of it play out right in front of us.
Right, so let's get straight into the hard facts of what is actually happening on the ground. Over the last few weeks, the globe just watched Operation Epic Fury unfold.
Right, those massive military strikes.
Exactly, just devastating high-impact strikes. And almost immediately, the Strait of Hormuz was effectively choked off. Which, if you look at the numbers, we are talking about a maritime choke point that handles, what, a massive 20% of the world's daily crude oil supply?
It's huge, yeah, 20%.
So the moment those waters became a combat zone, global markets just plummeted. Major shipping conglomerates ordered their vessels to drop anchor. Supply chains froze basically overnight.
The panic in the financial sector was just instantaneous. I mean, you had oil futures skyrocketing, insurance premiums for commercial vessels jumped by like 300% in a matter of days.
Wow, 300%.
Yeah, it was a rapid, cascading economic shock, just totally paralyzed the system.
But then we get this twist that nobody saw coming. The United States and Iran suddenly agree to a highly fragile 2-week ceasefire.
Right.
And the real shocker here, U.S. President Trump steps up to a podium and publicly credits China for helping bring the Iranian leadership to the negotiating table. And now, these high-stakes diplomatic talks are expected to kick off in Pakistan.
It's a massive geopolitical pivot, just packed into a matter of days, you know. It forces you to really look past the surface-level events.
Exactly.
Because when the dust settles on military strikes of that magnitude, the immediate question is always, why did the shooting actually stop?
And that is exactly why we are here. Welcome to the deep dive. If you are joining us, you are the kind of listener who wants to know what is actually driving the headlines. So our mission today is to unpack a massive stack of sources for you. We are looking at international news reports, confidential geoeconomic intelligence briefings, and a genuinely fascinating new artificial intelligence research paper.
That AI paper is wild, by the way.
It really is. We'll get to that. But by the end of this, we are going to understand the hidden forces holding this fragile ceasefire together. But before we jump into those sources, we need to set the ground rules for how we are analyzing all this.
Right, because things get heated quickly with these topics.
Exactly. Our goal today is not to figure out who the good guys or bad guys are. I mean, if you want political spin or partisan cheerleading, there are plenty of places to find that. In this deep dive, we are looking at the cold, hard facts completely impartially.
Just the data.
Just the data. We will explore the strategic decisions of the Trump administration, the Iranian leadership, and the Chinese government without taking any political sides. We are simply laying out the geoeconomic math operating beneath the surface.
Because that math is what is actually dictating these missile strikes.
Right. No spin, just the mechanics of global power.
Well, to understand those mechanics, we have to start with the player who unexpectedly stepped into the spotlight here, which is China. Because to really understand this ceasefire, you have to move past the idea of diplomacy as some sort of moral crusade.
Right, it's not about being nice.
Not at all. What's fascinating here is that China's mediation is actually about desperate self-preservation. They are not trying to win a Nobel Peace Prize, they're trying to keep their factories running.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because we need to look at the sheer volume of energy we are talking about. According to our intelligence briefings, China imports roughly 1.38 million barrels of oil every single day from Iran alone.
Every single day. That is massive.
It's staggering. That one single pipeline of energy accounts for over 80% of Iran's total oil exports. So China is essentially keeping the Iranian economy afloat.
Right, but that dependency, it cuts both ways. Because China is incredibly vulnerable right now. Their domestic economy is currently facing a sluggish growth target of just 4.5 to 5%. And for the Chinese economic model, a target that low is a massive red flag.
Because they need that constant expansion.
Right. They rely on relentless export-driven growth just to maintain employment and social stability. If the Strait of Hormuz stays closed for a prolonged period, the cost of manufacturing and shipping goods goes through the roof.
It would completely cripple Chinese exports.
Yeah, they stepped in to mediate this crisis because they literally cannot afford a long war that freezes global shipping. I mean, their economy would stall out entirely.
Okay, but if China is so heavily invested in keeping that oil flowing, and they have all this financial leverage over Iran, why are they refusing to offer Iran any actual security guarantees? I'm looking through these diplomatic reports, and China's behavior seems entirely contradictory.
How?
Well, they act like a mall security guard.
Hmm.
I mean, they blow the whistle, they propose a nice 5-point peace plan to stop the fight in the food court, but they absolutely refuse to step in and actually take a punch.
That is a great way to put it. The mall security guard analogy perfectly captures their strategy right now. They want the authority of the uniform without the physical risk.
Exactly.
Because behind closed doors, China's actual operational strategy is all about avoiding military entanglement. Our sources detail a specific moment where the United States directly requested that China send its warships to the Middle East to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz and protect commercial vessels.
And Beijing just flat out rejected the request.
Refused entirely.
Yeah.
And furthermore, they vetoed a United Nations resolution that would have authorized the use of an international military force to secure those shipping lanes.
Wow. So they won't help, and they won't let anyone else officially help either.
Right. Geopolitical analysts describe China's current playbook as messaging, not mediation. They are trying to project this image of a responsible, peaceful, global leader.
Which looks incredibly good for them ahead of that planned upcoming summit between President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Exactly. They want the photo op of proposing a peace plan in Pakistan, but they refuse to carry the heavy, expensive burden of actually policing the Middle East.
Because they know that getting bogged down in a regional war is a total trap. So they just stand on the sidelines and hold up a stop sign.
Yeah, that cautious defensive posture tells us everything about their current economic anxiety. They are just playing a massive game of damage control.
Which brings us to a massive contrast in strategies. So the U.S. and China are essentially playing two completely different games here. China is desperately trying to shield its vulnerable supply lines, while the United States is basically weaponizing its own economic surplus.
Right.
The U.S. playbook is built around highly aggressive, coercive power.
The fundamental difference in their diplomatic styles is just staggering to look at. I mean, the United States seamlessly integrates direct military action into its diplomatic negotiations.
Right, the U.S. strategy involves issuing these hard public deadlines and threatening to obliterate critical infrastructure just to force the other side into a deal.
It is not about building consensus at all. It is about applying maximum pressure.
And we see this formalized in a concept highlighted in our briefings called commercial diplomacy.
Yeah, that's a key term here.
Which is a strategy heavily championed by U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau. The U.S. is moving away from the old model of just handing out foreign aid to build goodwill.
Right. Those days are over.
Instead, they're leaning heavily into transactional diplomacy. They are demanding reciprocal commercial benefits for any assistance they provide. It's a very America First, strictly business approach.
And they are using their massive economic leverage to actively counter Chinese business contracts, particularly in the global south.
Interesting. How so?
Well, if an emerging nation wants U.S. security cooperation or financial backing, the U.S. is essentially demanding they reject Chinese infrastructure deals in return. It is a ruthless, highly effective use of state power.
And this coercive power works perfectly because of the underlying math of the energy market. It completely skews the leverage in America's favor.
Yeah, the math is fascinating.
Think about the global energy market, like a high-stakes game of poker, right? When a crisis hits and the bets get wildly expensive, most players panic.
Sure.
But the United States is the one who actually owns the casino. Because the U.S. is a major domestic producer of oil and liquid natural gas, or LNG.
Which means they do not experience an energy crisis the same way Europe or Asia does. Like when the Strait of Hormuz closes, global oil prices instantly spike.
Right. And because the U.S. produces so much of its own energy, the global demand for American energy exports suddenly surges.
Exactly.
European and Asian markets basically scramble to buy American liquid natural gas to replace what is trapped over in the Middle East. And this massive influx of global capital strengthens the U.S. dollar and just reinforces America's dominance in the global financial system.
While at the exact same time, China, which has to import 70% of its total oil, is just hemorrhaging cash to keep the lights on in its factory.
Why?
Yeah, every single day the strait is closed, the power gap between the United States and China actually widens, the crisis strengthens the U.S., and bleeds Beijing.
So what does this all mean? Because there is a paradox here that we really need to resolve. We know China uses Iran as a political partner to push back against the U.S.-led global order.
Right, they have that strategic alignment.
But if they are allies, Why is Beijing being so incredibly cautious about protecting the Iranian regime from collapsing?
Well, it really comes down to the stark difference between a political partnership and hard commercial reality. Politically, yes, China appreciates having Iran as a disruptive force that distracts the United States. But economically,
Let me guess, the money tells a different story.
it is a completely different story. China's trade with Gulf monarchies like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates absolutely dwarfs its trade with Iran.
The numbers in the report are staggering. Saudi Arabia is consistently one of China's top external oil suppliers, with bilateral trade frequently exceeding $100 billion a year. Iran represents just a fraction of that volume.
Right. So when Beijing calculates its long-term economic priorities, the actual survival of Iran's current political regime does not rank very high.
They just need the oil.
Exactly. China cares about keeping supply lines open and maintaining stable trade routes with the broader Middle East. If a totally different government took over in Iran tomorrow, as long as they kept selling oil to Beijing, China would likely be perfectly fine with it.
That makes total sense. That is why they will not offer military security to the current leadership. They are protecting their broader portfolio, not their disruptive partner.
Exactly.
Now, human analysts have been arguing over who is winning this standoff for weeks, trying to weigh all these different economic factors. But to really cut through that human bias, researchers recently tried something completely different. They stripped away human emotion entirely.
This is the AI study.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. We found this fascinating academic study published on ArcSIF that tracked how artificial intelligence models reason through this exact crisis in real time.
And the methodology behind this study is just brilliant. The researchers fed live, unfiltered news updates, financial data, and military reports directly into advanced large language models.
Like giving an AI a live news feed.
Exactly. They wanted to see how a machine, completely devoid of human panic or political allegiance, would process the fog of war and predict the outcome.
Because you watch the news during a crisis, and human commentators are immediately shouting about a nuclear World War III, right?
Oh yeah, the panic is instant.
But the AI models processed the exact same data and accurately predicted that the conflict would not escalate into a traditional global military war. Instead, they coined a brand new term for it.
What was it?
They categorized it as a globalized regional war.
That distinction there is vital. The AI recognized that in our highly interconnected modern world, the real weapons of mass destruction are economic shockwaves. The models pointed directly to actions like Qatar halting its liquid natural gas production and major shipping conglomerates freezing their global routes.
So the AI understood that taking down a maritime supply chain is just as devastating to a rival nation as dropping a bomb on a city. I mean, you do not need to invade a country if you can just starve its industrial base.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the AI made a chillingly accurate prediction about the trajectory of the conflict.
What did it foresee?
The models concluded that the war would not end with a clean, decisive military victory for either side. No flags planted on a conquered capital.
Right.
They also predicted it would not end with a sudden, happy diplomatic breakthrough where everyone just becomes friends.
Instead, the AI predicted what it called a herding stalemate. It recognized that modern geopolitical conflicts are ultimately ended by mutual economic exhaustion.
Yeah. The missiles only stop flying when the financial pain of continuing the war simply becomes too expensive for either society to endure.
I have to challenge the machine's logic here, though, because geopolitics is messy. It is driven by human ego and sudden tragedy. I mean, right in the middle of this crisis, Iran lost its supreme leader, and his son, Moshtaba Khamenei, suddenly took over.
Right, a massive shakeup.
That is a highly emotional human variable. Can an AI actually account for the psychology of a sudden succession crisis?
Well, the study shows the AI models absolutely accounted for it. And their deduction of the political psychology was incredibly sharp.
Really?
Yeah. The machines realized that a new, untested leader who is stepping into power while under active Israeli and U.S. military threat is in a highly precarious position.
Because if he negotiates immediately, he looks terrified. He looks like he is surrendering just to save his own skin.
Precisely. The AI calculated the domestic political costs. It understood that showing a willingness to compromise during a violent, uncertain transition of power would likely trigger an internal revolt.
Hardliners within his own regime would see it as weakness.
Exactly. So the AI predicted the new leader would be forced to maintain an aggressive, uncompromising stance just to survive domestically.
It is entirely about optics and self-preservation. But the AI also dug into the actual structure of the military itself, right?
It did. The AI analyzed Iran's specific military doctrine, which is known as the Mosaic Defense.
The Mosaic Defense.
Right. Because Iran knows its central communications could be destroyed in a major war by U.S. strikes, they operate on a highly decentralized command structure. Local military units and regional commanders are heavily armed and explicitly empowered to act independently.
Without waiting for orders from Tehran.
Without waiting for orders, yeah.
Think about what that actually looks like on the ground. You have these isolated commanders operating in a communications blackout. So even if the new supreme leader signs a piece of paper agreeing to a ceasefire, the communication lag and the decentralized command mean a rogue unit could launch a strike tomorrow and accidentally restart the entire war.
Because there is no master off switch to pull. Yeah. When you feed all of those variables into the system, a new leader who cannot afford to look weak, a decentralized military that cannot be easily turned off, China's desperate need to keep oil flowing, and America's massive leverage in the energy market, the AI proved that a messy, unwritten, deeply fragile ceasefire was literally the only mathematically logical outcome.
It predicted exactly the pause we are witnessing today.
Exactly.
So, to bring this all together, we have covered immense ground today. We started by looking at a sudden, incredibly fragile 2-week pause in a devastating conflict. We unpacked the raw economic data driving China's desperate need to step in, acting as a mediator purely to protect its own energy lifelines.
Right, the mall cop strategy.
Exactly. We contrasted that deep vulnerability with America's aggressive strategy, utilizing its own energy dominance to apply maximum coercive pressure and strengthen the dollar.
America owning the casino.
And finally, we explored how artificial intelligence models perfectly mapped out this exact scenario, a hurting economic stalemate, where nobody achieves a glorious military victory, but everyone simply becomes too exhausted to keep shooting.
It forces us to completely reevaluate our traditional understanding of power. And I think this raises an important question, for you to think about.
Yeah.
If an artificial intelligence can look at a massive military conflict and instantly realize that the real battlefield is not the desert, but rather the global supply chains, are we rapidly approaching an era where traditional military victories are entirely obsolete? Are wars no longer won by whoever has the largest army, but simply by whoever can endure the most economic pain?
That is the thought that will completely change how you watch the news going forward. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember to always look past the surface narratives and keep questioning the headlines. Because while the global economy might have caught its breath for a fragile 2-week pause, the real question is who has the lungs to survive the next round. Catch you next time.